According to media reports, she's been staying at a $24,000 a day wellness clinic since the most recent batch of Epstein files landed. Is that correct?
It is indeed. Well, we know from Swiss sources that she's been staying at this luxury resort in Switzerland because she was, quote,
She once stood on the Buckingham Palace balcony as crowds cheered and cameras flashed. Today, her name appears in document releases tied to Jeffrey Epstein, collapsed companies, and mounting financial fallout. How does someone go from a globally televised royal wedding to allegedly asking a convicted offender for a job? This isn't a sudden downfall, it's a 40-year pattern of spending, rescues, reinvention, and choices that kept escalating. And the deeper you look, the clearer the timeline becomes. Because what happened behind closed doors tells a very different story than the one the public was shown. If you want the full breakdown, the financial spiral, the private emails, and the chain of events that led here, make sure you subscribe. You're going to want to see how all of this connects.
Ma'am, excuse me, what are your thoughts for your American friends today? I don't have enough words. It's very difficult.
Before there were leaked emails or public scandals, there was a lifestyle that few people ever saw up close. During her marriage, annual spending reportedly climbed to around £860,000, and the details matter. Around £50,000 a year went to floral arrangements alone. Gifts totaled roughly £150,000. Clothing added another £100,000. In one shopping trip at Bloomingdale's, £25,000 was spent in less than an hour. This wasn't occasional extravagance, it was routine. When invoices arrived, they didn't always come with immediate consequences. Retailers were reportedly willing to wait, knowing who she was. Bills accumulated quietly. Behind the scenes, financial rescues stepped in more than once, including a £500,000 emergency payment in the mid-1990s after a bank issued a short deadline to settle outstanding debt. By the time the divorce was finalized in 1996, reports suggested obligations exceeding $4 million. And something critical changed at that point. The safety net was pulled back. For years, spending had continued without real adjustment. Now the bills were hers to face. And without structured limits, the pressure didn't slow down, it intensified. For a moment, it looked like she had rebuilt everything. After the divorce, Sarah Ferguson moved to the United States and began reshaping her public image. A Weight Watchers partnership purportedly brought in around £500,000 and lasted more than a decade. She secured a major endorsement deal with Ocean Spray, becoming the first member of the royal family to commercially promote products on American television. Her children's books generated royalties. Television interviews presented a woman who claimed she had learned from past financial mistakes. On the surface, it looked stable.
So Sarah Ferguson has closed down 6 businesses. A lot of them owe money, or a lot of them just had £1, for a shareholder.
But the numbers told a different story. By 2007, financial filings for her charitable foundation showed it raised over $58,000 in a year, while distributing less than half of that amount to actual charitable causes. Around the same period, multiple lawsuits surfaced in England from professionals pursuing unpaid invoices, including an accountant, legal representatives, and a photography company. Then came another setback. In 2009, her American lifestyle venture collapsed, leaving reported debts of roughly $600,000. Money earned from her involvement in The Young Victoria was invested into the business and then lost when it failed. Income had returned, visibility had returned, but the instability never fully disappeared. And as financial pressure mounted again, she reached out to someone already surrounded by controversy.
Well, all the time, and we used to feel a bit sorry for Fergie because we thought she was embroiled and brought under the sort of shadow, if you like, of her husband.
By 2009, financial pressure was building again, and that's when Jeffrey Epstein entered the picture in a way few expected. At that point, he had already served time related to solicitation involving a minor. His reputation was damaged, his name carried controversy, most public figures were distancing themselves. But that wasn't what happened here. Emails later recovered show that Ferguson was in contact with him during this period. In those messages, she reportedly asked for guidance about bankruptcy and possible financial restructuring. She discussed potential rescue options. She was looking for solutions, and that alone raised eyebrows. But the communication didn't stop there. Recovered correspondence also revealed plans for a lunch meeting in Miami, one that would include her daughters. The timing surprised many observers. By then, Epstein's history was widely known, and yet the relationship appeared comfortable. Then came the language that sparked even more scrutiny. In later document releases, messages surfaced where she allegedly referred to him as a close confidant, even describing him as the kind of brother she had always wanted. For critics, that wording stood out. But what surfaced next was even more unsettling. One message, dated shortly before a major public scandal in 2010, reportedly showed her asking whether he could hire her, even suggesting she would take on domestic work. The tone, according to those who reviewed the files, suggested urgency. Why would someone with global name recognition be asking that question? And why him? Those questions grew louder in early 2026 when millions of pages connected to Epstein were released by U.S. authorities. The volume of documentation pulled past associations back into the spotlight. The timing couldn't have been worse. Because just days after one of those reported emails was sent, something happened that would explode into public view and change everything almost overnight. In May 2010, everything shifted in a matter of hours. A meeting was arranged at a London apartment. The man she believed she was speaking to claimed he was a wealthy businessman interested in connections. Hidden cameras were already recording. What happened next would be broadcast around the world. During the meeting, £40,000 in cash was handed over. On tape, she was heard suggesting that a total of £500,000 could secure access to Andrew. At one point, she said the money opens doors. Those words spread fast. Within hours of the footage airing, the backlash was immediate. Headlines dominated front pages. Commentators questioned judgment. The footage was replayed repeatedly. But that wasn't the full story. She issued an apology almost immediately, calling it a serious error in judgment. In later interviews, including a widely viewed television appearance, she described the moment as hitting rock bottom. She framed it as desperation, a lapse under financial strain. Yet there was something the public didn't know at the time. Days before the sting became public, she had reportedly sent an email to Epstein. The timeline would only surface years later when document releases filled in the gaps. That detail changed how some viewed the entire episode. Because it suggested the financial pressure wasn't sudden, it had been building. And while she publicly vowed to learn from the experience, promising to sever certain ties and move forward differently, the situation didn't close there. In fact, what followed would quietly contradict that promise and resurface years later in a way few expected. Publicly, she said the connection was over. In March 2011, reports surfaced that £15,000 had been transferred by Epstein to one of her associates to help resolve an outstanding debt. The payment reportedly moved through channels connected to Andrew. When questioned, she acknowledged it had been a serious mistake and stated clearly that all contact would end. It sounded final, but it wasn't. Years passed, the headlines faded. She continued working on media projects, public appearances, and business ventures. On the surface, it looked like the damage had been contained. Then private correspondence leaked in 2025. Messages suggested she had apologized to Epstein after publicly distancing herself. In one exchange, she allegedly described him as loyal and generous. In another, she wrote words that critics said contradicted everything she had claimed. The narrative shifted again. At the same time, her business structure began to weaken. Multiple companies associated with her name moved toward dissolution. Fergus Farm, Luna Investments, Solomon Limited. Entities that once carried ambition were quietly closing. And the numbers told their own story. Her lifestyle brand, Ginger and Moss, reported a deficit of more than £321,000 for the year ending March 2025. Unpaid obligations reached roughly £363,000. Remaining assets, around £43,000. The gap was widening. Then came another blow. Royal Lodge, the 30-room Windsor residence she had occupied for years, was no longer sustainable. The cost of maintaining it had become too heavy. Leaving wasn't symbolic, it was financial. And as that chapter closed, a separate development reignited public attention. In February 2026, Andrew was arrested on misconduct suspicions tied to his former trade envoy role. Allegations he disputes. The timing brought past associations back into discussion. Media coverage widened again. The pattern was impossible to ignore. This wasn't one failed business. It wasn't one controversial friendship. It wasn't one reckless moment caught on camera. It was decades of financial imbalance, temporary rescues, and decisions made under pressure, each one compounding the next. And when you step back and look at the full timeline, one question lingers. Was this a series of isolated missteps, or was it always heading here?